The Greens had one seat in the last Parliament and are hopeful of scooping up some more this time round, and then joining what they call a progressive bloc with the Scottish and Welsh nationalists. They're all against austerity and Trident. Joining me now to explain the Greens' agenda is the party leader in England and Wales, Natalie Bennett. Natalie, welcome to you.
It's great to be back.
Looking at your manifesto and what has been said by the party spokesman for a while, I find it very hard to understand whether you think the deficit is a real problem that has to be dealt with.
Well, what we think is that there's been an undue focus on a deficit and less of a thought consideration of the kind of society that we need to have. So we certainly need to deal with the deficit. Our manifesto, which will be released next week, the deficit is reduced over the term of the Parliament. But we think about the question of why we're spending money, why we're borrowing money, and why we're not doing it now. And the simple fact is, at the moment, we're not collecting tax from multinational companies and rich individuals that could be paying for the essential public services. And we're seeing so many people in our society struggling, and that's what we need to tackle. 800,000 people who need social care over 65s who aren't getting it.
I understand all of that. Nonetheless, we are paying huge amounts of money, £30 billion in debt interest, £1.9 trillion black hole at the moment. That does need to be dealt with, which is why all party leaders, including you, are being asked, OK, how would you deal with it? You don't want public spending cuts. Your tax rises suggested so far are relatively modest, 60p rate and so forth.
Well, what we're announcing this morning is the 60p top rate of tax, and that's for people earning more than £150,000. That's the richest 1%. But what we've also identified is very much the fact that HMRC's very conservative figures say that tax avoidance and evasion is costing us £34 billion. We've announced a wealth tax, which by the end of the Parliament could be bringing in £25 billion a year.
Okay, just
Robin Hood, let me finish. Robin Hood tax on the financial transactions, £20 billion by the end of the Parliament. What we're doing is rebalancing our society.
Over some of those in that case. The 60p rate, how much would that raise?
That's raising about £2 billion. That's not...
So not very much.
No,
does that go directly to pay off the deficit?
But the big focus for that is the fact that the inequality in our society, which is a huge and rising problem, the richest 1%. Now, so what the 60p is for is really to identify the fact that some people are taking too much out of our society. They need to pay back. In the Green Party, we're calling for a 10-to-1 ratio between the top paid and lowest paid person in an organisation. That's pretty well cuts in at about 10 times the living wage rate. And of course, we want to see
a much flatter society when it comes to income. And you also want a wealth tax. How exactly would that work? Would people pay taxes on their Lamborghinis, on the paintings on their walls? How would you assess? How would you collect a wealth tax?
Well, the wealth tax would apply to people worth more than £3 million, 2% a year. That would be a self-declaration. A lot's changed in the world in terms of tax.
So people have to go around their house saying that bit of silver is worth X amount. I now need to be taxed on that wealth.
Basically, people need to...
view of human nature.
Well, I think there's a couple of things here that there's some really good research out of America showing that if people think they're likely to get caught in not paying tax, they will declare fairly. And what's changed really, the really substantial sums we're talking about are the money that's been deposited in tax havens around the world. And there's a new global transparency happening with that, quite rightly, and that's absolutely critical area that we need to focus on. We need to rebalance this society. You look at the fact that even the IMF and the World Bank are saying that inequality are economic threats.
Let's look at another couple of your policies. Did you have a flutter yesterday on the National?
I confess I wasn't watching, didn't know anything about it. What we want
to ban the Grand National, don't you?
What we want to call is for a review of all animal racing, commercial animal racing.
But leading to a ban is what you want.
Well, what we want to do is a whole range of issues dealing with animal protection. So,
I'm sorry, I just have to take, do you want to ban the Grand National?
Well, I can give you an exclusive preview of our manifesto, which says we want a complete review of all horse and greyhound racing. That's what's in the manifesto.
Why horse racing? No animals have died in the Grand National now for 3 years.
Well, I think there's a whole range of broader issues of animal protection here we really need to talk about, which is things like the badger cull. We want to ban...
I'm sorry, I'm asking about the Grand National.
Driven grouse shooting. Well, there's a whole range of issues here which really need to be put on the agenda. Things like banning snares of animals, and also, of course, tackling factory...
Those are very different issues from wanting to ban the country's favourite horse race.
Well, what we're calling for is a complete review tackling the animal protection issues.
Including for horse racing, and what I'm asking you is why including for horse racing?
Well, because there are clearly animal protection issues there that need to be addressed. The fact of not just what happens in races, but what happens to the animals the animals that disappear from the system, the whole range of issues. But this is a much broader issue, and factory farming is something I'm at least going to get the 2 words in there.
Get the 2 words in there. Now, you want to be part of this, as it were, broad coalition with the SNP and Plaid Cymru. You might have influence, therefore, for the Green Party. What is your absolute iron cast, I was going to say red line, but I guess deep green line? What is the one issue that would absolutely mean more to you than anything else in a coalition negotiation?
We've identified a range of issues, and obviously anti-austerity, making sure that with the poor, the disadvantaged don't continue to pay for the greed and fraud of the bankers. And that means, some of the things that have hit the disabled, the most vulnerable hardest, the Independent Living Fund, 18,000 of the most stable.
In essence, you're the anti-capitalist party as much as you are the Green Party now.
Well, we are the party that says everybody in this society should have access to resources for a decent quality of life, and we have to live within the environmental limits of our planet. And I will point out that
I think you won't, because we've run out of time. But thank you very much indeed, Natalie Bennett.